I sat there in that leather chair that used to belong to Mr. Thompson, staring at the piece of paper the new owner had just pushed across the desk. 40%. 40% less for the same 14 years I'd given them every early morning. Every late night, every weekend I'd missed my grandchildren. My hand didn't even shake. I just looked him in the eye and said, "No, Darren, I won't be signing that." And in that moment, something inside me that had been holding on for years finally let go. Let me take you back to how it all started, because you need to understand what those 14 years really meant to me. My name is Evelyn Harper, but everybody at Thompson Sons Automotive called me Evie. I started there in 2011. A 40-odd-year-old widow with 2 teenagers still at home and a mortgage that felt like a noose. My Harold had passed the winter before a heart attack, just like that, while he was shoveling snow. One minute he was whistling Amazing Grace, the next he was gone. The insurance barely covered the funeral. I needed a job, any job, and Thompson Sons was hiring a bookkeeper. Mr. Thompson Walter interviewed me himself. He was 72 then, tall and thin with those kind blue eyes that had seen every kind of hard time. He didn't ask about my typing speed or my Excel skills. He just leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, and said, "Evie, can you keep a secret?" I laughed, nervous, and said, "Depends on the secret." He smiled and told me the shop was in trouble, suppliers raising prices, big chain garages undercutting him. But he wasn't ready to close the doors his daddy had opened in 1958. "I need someone who'll fight for this place like it's their own," he said. "Someone who understands family." I didn't know it then, but that was the day I stopped being just an employee. The shop smelled like motor oil and coffee every morning. The guys Rusty, Miguel, young Tyler, who was barely 20 would tease me about my cinnamon rolls I brought every Friday. I kept the books, sure, but I also kept the men. When Rusty's wife left him, I was the one who made sure he ate something besides whiskey. When Miguel's daughter needed braces, I found a dentist who'd work with payments. When Tyler's mama got sick, I drove him to the hospital at 2 in the morning because he was too shaken to drive. Walter noticed. He'd come in early just to sit at my desk with his coffee and talk. About his wife who'd passed 10 years earlier. About his son Darren who'd moved to California and never came back. "You're the daughter I never had, Evie," he'd say, and I'd wave him off. But Lord, it meant something. It meant everything. My own kids Sarah and Jacob grew up in that shop. Sarah did her homework in the break room after school. Jacob learned to change oil before he could drive. When Sarah got married, we had the reception right there in the parking lot, string lights, folding tables, Walter grilling steaks like it was the proudest day of his life. When Jacob joined the Marines, Walter closed the shop for half a day so we could all watch him ship out. Those years weren't easy. There were winters when the heat barely worked and I'd wear fingerless gloves to type. Summers when the air conditioning died and we'd all be dripping sweat by noon. But we were a family. We celebrated births and mourned deaths together. We pulled each other through. Walter retired in 2019, said his arthritis was too bad to keep up. He sold the business to a group of investors but kept me on as general manager. "Evie runs this place better than I ever did," he told them. The new owners were distant, mostly silent partners who just wanted the quarterly reports. I didn't mind. The shop still felt like ours. Then Walter passed in 2023. Quietly, in his sleep. I found out when the funeral home called looking for next of kin. Darren flew in from California first time in 15 years. He was 50 then. Slick hair, expensive suit, that tight smile that never reached his eyes. At the funeral, he shook my hand and said, "Dad always spoke highly of you, Evelyn." I thanked him, thought that was that, but Darren didn't leave after the funeral. He started coming to the shop. "Just checking in," he said. Then he bought out the other investors, became sole owner. And that's when things started to change. Little things at first. He replaced our old coffee machine with some fancy pod thing nobody could figure out. Moved the break room fridge because it was in the way of workflow. Started questioning every expense. Why were we still giving employees Christmas hams? Why did we close early on Fridays in summer? I'd known something was coming. You don't spend 14 years reading the books without learning to spot storm clouds in the numbers. But nothing prepared me for that Tuesday morning in March, when Darren called me into the office, Walter's old office, and closed the door. The office still smelled faintly of Walter's Old Spice and the lemon polish I used on the desk every Thursday. Darren sat in the chair that had been too big for him even as a boy visiting his daddy. He didn't offer me a seat, just pushed that single sheet of paper across the blotter like it was a lunch order. "New compensation structure," he said, voice smooth as the waxed floor in a showroom. Effective immediately. We're streamlining. I picked it up. The numbers swam for a second, then settled into cruel clarity. My salary $72,000 after 14 years of raises that barely kept pace with inflation was now $43,200, 40% gone. Benefits slashed. No more matching 401k. Vacation cut from 4 weeks to 10 days. I looked up. This is a joke. It's business. Evelyn. He leaned back, fingers laced over a belly that hadn't been there at the funeral. The market's tight. Labor costs are killing us. You're seasoned. We can hire 2 fresh bookkeepers for what we're paying you. Seasoned, like I was a steak past its prime. I set the paper down without creasing it. I've been here since before your father needed a cane to walk these floors. I trained every accountant you've got. I know where every penny goes down to the paper clips Rusty steals for his grandkids' school projects. Darren's smile thinned. Sentiment doesn't pay the electric bill. Sign, or we'll have to consider this your resignation. The clock on the wall, Walter's old regulator, still ticking steady after 50 years, filled the silence. I could hear Miguel's impact wrench out in the bay, the familiar rat-a-tat-tat like a heartbeat. My own heart was doing something slower. Heavier. I thought of Sarah's face when she'd called last week. Little Emma had just lost her first tooth, and they were saving for braces. Jacob was deploying again in June. His wife Marisol was working double shifts at the hospital. My paycheck wasn't just mine. It was groceries and mortgage and the light bill so my grandbabies could read at night. But I also thought of Walter's voice, gravelly from years of shouting over engines. Never let anybody make you feel small. Evie, you stand tall. I slid the paper back. I won't be signing. Darren's eyebrows went up. Theatrical. You're walking away from 14 years. For pride. No, I said, surprised at how calm I sounded. I'm walking away from disrespect. He stood, palms flat on the desk. 2 weeks' notice. Then, clean out your office. I was already at the door. Make it 1. I'll be gone by Friday. The hallway felt longer than usual. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead like an angry bee. I passed Tyler. He was 30 now, married, with a baby on the way, and he looked up from the work order he was filling. Everything okay, Miss Evie? I managed a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. Just fine, sugar. Finish that brake job before Miguel eats your lunch. I didn't go back to my desk. I went to the ladies' room, locked the stall, and let myself cry for exactly 3 minutes. Quiet, shoulders shaking, the kind of crying that doesn't make noise but leaves your ribs aching. Then I washed my face with the rough brown paper towels, dabbed on the coral lipstick I kept in my purse for church, and walked out like nothing had happened. The rest of that day, I moved through the shop like a ghost. Rusty asked why I was wearing my good blouse on a Tuesday. I told him I had a meeting after work. Miguel brought me a cup of coffee too sweet. The way I secretly liked it, and I drank it black to punish myself for lying. At 4:57 p.m., I typed my resignation on the ancient Dell that still had a floppy drive. 2 sentences. Effective March 31st. I resign my position as general manager. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. I printed it, signed with the same pen Walter had given me for my 10th anniversary sterling silver. Heavy in my handband, left it on Darren's desk. Then I started cleaning for 14 years. The top drawer held birthday cards from the guys, yellowed with age. A photo of Sarah in her cap and gown, arms around Walter. A tiny plastic wrench Jacob had made me in shop class. The bottom drawer was worse files I'd kept when the IRS audited us in 2015. Every receipt annotated in my careful handwriting. I boxed what was mine, left what belonged to the company. By 6:30 the office was bare, except for the regulator. Clock still ticking on the wall. I locked the door behind me and slipped the key under the mat, the way Walter used to when he forgot his at home. That night I drove the long way to my little house on Maple Street, the one Harold and I bought in 1989 with the picket fence that leans a little to the left. I made meatloaf because it was Jacob's favorite and I needed my hands busy. The onions made me cry again, but I told myself it was just the onions. Sarah called while I was mashing potatoes. Mom, you sound funny. Is everything okay? I almost told her, almost let it spill out like loose change. Instead, I said, just tired, honey, long day. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile and stared at the numbers I'd scribbled on the back of an envelope. Savings, $23,000. Retirement, $112,000 if I didn't touch it till 6. Mortgage, 12 years left. No job. I was 62 years old. Starting over with a resume that began Thompson Sons Automotive, 2011 present. but I also felt something I hadn't in years, like I'd been carrying Walter's legacy on my back and finally set it down. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. The next morning, Wednesday, I walked into the shop at 6:45 like always. The guys were already there, sipping coffee, talking about the Lakers. Rusty looked up. "Miss Evie, you forgot something." I took a breath that tasted like motor oil and possibility. "Boys, gather round. I've got something to say." The break room smelled like burnt toast and the lemony cleaner Miguel used when he thought no one was looking. The guys crowded in, Rusty with grease still under his nails, Tyler cradling his coffee like it might run away, Miguel wiping his hands on a red rag that had once been white, 3 mechanics, 2 apprentices, and Lisa the parts runner who'd started as a high school copy. My family, though none of us shared blood. I closed the door so the customers out front wouldn't hear. The click of the latch sounded louder than a judge's gavel. "I'm leaving," I said. Simple. No drama. Rusty's mug stopped halfway to his mouth. "Leaving for where?" "Leaving Thompson Sons. Friday's my last day." Tyler's face went the color of skim milk. "Mise Evie." "No, you can't. I already did." I pulled the resignation copy from my purse, unfolded it smoothly. Darren offered me a 40% pay cut, said I was replaceable. Miguel muttered something in Spanish that would have made his mama wash his mouth with soap. Rusty just stared like I'd grown a second head. Lisa spoke first, voice small. "What are we supposed to do without you?" "You'll do what you've always done," I told her. "Fix cars. Take care of each other. Only now you'll do it for a man who thinks loyalty's a line item he can cross out." I watched it sink in. Rusty's jaw worked like he was chewing nails. Miguel's fists opened and closed. Tyler looked ready to cry or punch something, maybe both. I laid it out plain. No sugar, no tears. Told them about the new contract, the slashed benefits, the way Darren had talked about streamlining labor costs like we were spark plugs on a shelf. Told them I wasn't asking them to quit, just wanted them to know the truth before the rumor mill started grinding. When I finished, the room was so quiet I could hear the vending machine humming in the corner. Rusty broke it. "He can't do this." "He already did," I said. Miguel stepped forward. "We walk with you, Miss Evie, all of us." My throat closed up. I'd half expected pity, maybe awkward hugs. Not this. "No," I said gently. "You've got families, mortgages. That little girl of yours starts kindergarten in August. Miguel, Tyler's wife is due in July. I won't let you throw that away because I'm too stubborn to take a cut." Tyler's voice cracked. "You're not stubborn. You're the only reason this place still feels like home." I reached out, touched his cheek the way I did when he was 19 and hung over from his first heartbreak. "Home's bigger than 4 walls and a lift, baby. You'll make it wherever you are." Rusty cleared his throat. "What are you gonna do, Evie?" I didn't know. Not really, but I smiled anyway. "First I'm gonna finish the week. Then I'm gonna drink a whole pot of real coffee, not that pod nonsense, and figure it out." We stood there a minute longer, the 6 of us in a loose circle like we were praying. Then the bell out front dinged. Mrs. Larson, needing her oil change, damned life, dragged us back. The rest of Wednesday and Thursday I trained Lisa on the invoicing software, showed Tyler how to sweet-talk the parts supplier when we were short, and walked Rusty through the payroll taxes one last time. I left sticky notes on everything color-coded, because that's how my brain works. On the coffee pot, real filters are in the drawer, not the trash. On the safe, combination is Walter's birthday, don't let Darren change it. Friday morning I wore the navy dress I saved for weddings and funerals. The guys had cleaned the break room till it sparkled. Someone had strung Christmas lights even, though it was March, and there was a sheet cake from Costco that said, "We love you, Evie," in wobbly blue icing. I cried, then. Couldn't help it. Rusty hugged me so hard my feet left the ground. Miguel slipped a tiny Virgin de Guadalupe medal into my palm. Tyler gave me his lucky socket wrench, the one he swore never stripped a bolt. Lisa pressed a card into my hand, thick enough to be a phone book. Every employee, past and present, had signed it. Darren never showed. "Send an email at 9:03 a.m. HR will process your final check. Return company keys by 5 p.m. I left at 4:58. Keys on his desk. Cake in the break room. My box of memories in the trunk of my Corolla. The drive home blurred. I kept seeing Walter's face in the windshield, smiling, proud, a little sad. When I pulled into my driveway, Sarah's minivan was there. Jacob's truck too. Balloons tied to the porch rail bobbed in the breeze. Inside, the house smelled like roast chicken and rosemary. My dining room table, usually just me and the newspaper, was crowded with faces I loved. Sarah, her husband Mark, Emma, and little Henry. Jacob in uniform, Marisol glowing beside him. Even my sister Ruth had driven in from Dayton. Sarah met me at the door, eyes red. Mom, the kids told us everything. I started to apologize, didn't want to worry them, but Jacob cut me off with a hug that smelled like army soap and desert dust. You're not doing this alone, he said into my hair. We ate until we couldn't move, laughed until we cried, planned like generals. Sarah had already updated my LinkedIn. Lord, I didn't even know I had one. Jacob printed resumes on the good paper. Marisol, bless her, had a nurse friend whose husband owned a dealership in Columbus. Looking for a controller. By 10 o'clock the kids were asleep on the couch. Henry's thumb in his mouth. Emma's tiara from Halloween still on her head. The adults sat on the porch with decaf and the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. Ruth lit a cigarette. She wasn't supposed to, but I let her. You know what Walter would say. I nodded. Fight like hell, then let go and let God. She exhaled smoke into the night. You did the fighting part. Time to let go. Saturday I slept till 9, first time in 20 years. Woke to the smell of bacon and the sound of Jacob arguing with someone on the phone. Came downstairs to find him pacing the kitchen, face like thunder. Darren just posted the GM job, he said. Half your salary, benefits optional. I poured coffee. Let him, but something in me itched. Not anger, justice. Clean, sharp, necessary. That afternoon, I called Lisa. She answered on the first ring, voice hushed. Miss Evie, you won't believe this place. Darren's in there yelling about inventory. Rusty walked out at lunch. My heart squeezed. He quit. No. Walked out to his truck, came back with a six-pack, and told Darren if he didn't apologize to every man in the shop, he'd personally make sure every customer within 50 miles knew what kind of boss he was. Darren locked himself in the office. I laughed so hard coffee came out my nose. Sunday I went to church. Sat in our old pew, third from the back, left side. The same one Harold and I claimed in 1992. Pastor Jenkins preached on David and Goliath, but all I could think was sometimes Goliath wears a suit and carries a spreadsheet. Monday morning, I was up at 5. Same as always, but instead of driving to the shop, I drove to the library. Spent 3 hours polishing my resume till it gleamed. Applied to 6 jobs before noon. Tuesday, the calls started. Not from Darren, from customers. Mrs. Larson wanted to know why her bill was suddenly 20% higher. Mr. Patel asked if I was still doing taxes on the side. The high school principal called shop class needed a guest speaker. By Wednesday, I had an interview lined up. By Thursday, 2 more. Friday. Exactly 1 week after I walked out, I was sipping coffee on my porch when a familiar pickup rumbled up. Rusty climbed out, hat in hand. Miss Evie, he said, we need to talk. Rusty stood on my welcome mat like he was afraid the porch might swallow him. His boots were clean, an event rarer than a blue moon, and the lines around his eyes looked deeper than I remembered. He turned the hat in his hands the way men do when words feel too heavy. Come in, sugar, I said, holding the screen door. Coffee's fresh. I even used the good beans. He followed me to the kitchen, sat at the table where generations of Harper crises had been solved over pie. I poured him a mug, black, 2 sugars, the way he'd drunk it since his divorce in 2014. The steam curled between us like a question. Finally, he spoke. The shop's falling apart. Evie. I waited. Rusty wasn't one for gossip. When he talked, you listened. Darren fired Lisa yesterday. Said she was insubordinate because she asked why the health insurance deductible tripled. He rubbed a thumb over a scar on his knuckle, old burn from a radiator hose. Tyler gave notice this morning. Miguel's got 1 foot out the door. Customers are calling asking where you went. Old Mr. Kowalski told Darren to his face he'd rather push his Buick to the chain garage than let some suit touch it. I set my own mug down carefully. I'm sorry, Rusty, truly, but I can't fix it from here. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. We don't want you to fix it. We want you to take it. I blinked. Take what? The shop. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded packet of papers, thick as a sandwich. Walter's will, the one nobody knew about till the lawyer called me last night. My pulse did a funny skip. Walter died 2 years ago. Yep, and he left a codicil lawyer word dated 3 months before he passed. Said if Darren ever tried to gut the soul of Thompson Sons, the employees had first right of refusal to buy at 2019 valuation. Not today. 2019. Rusty's grin was slow and wolfish. That's half what Darren paid the investors. I stared at the papers. Legal gibberish, but the numbers jumped out. $480,000. Darren had bragged at the funeral he'd turned a tidy profit, flipping the silent partners. It turned out Walter had outfoxed him from the grave. "There's more," Rusty said. "Walter set up a trust. Seed money. Enough for a down payment and 6 months operating capital. Interest-free. He named you executor." My hands trembled just a little as I turned the pages. Walter's handwriting in the margin. "For Evie and the boys. Keep her running." I looked up. "Why didn't the lawyer call me?" "Darren told him you'd left the company. Conflict of interest." Lawyers didn't know better. I set him straight. I laughed, then couldn't help it. The sound startled the cardinal on my feeder outside the window. Walter, that sly old fox, had been planning this longer than any of us knew. Rusty wasn't finished. We took a vote. Every tech, every parts runner is still on payroll. Unanimous. We pool what we can savings. Second mortgages, Miguel's cousins, a loan officer. You put up your retirement if you're willing. We run it as a co. Equal shares. Your name on the sign if you want it. Or we keep Thompson Sons. Your call. I thought of Darren's smug face. The 40% cut. The way he'd said seasoned like I was yesterday's bread. Then I thought of the guys in the break room with cake on paper plates. The Christmas lights in March. The socket wrench in my glove box. "How long do we have?" I asked. 30 days from notification. The lawyer's courier delivered Darren's copy this morning. He's unhappy. I could imagine. Probably shredding spreadsheets as we spoke. I stood, walked to the window. My yard was coming alive, daffodils pushing through last year's leaves. The maple Herald planted the year Sarah was born, just starting to bud. Everything felt possible and terrifying at once. "I need to talk to my kids," I said. Rusty nodded. "Take the weekend. We'll hold the line." He left the papers on the table and hugged me goodbye, quick, fierce, smelling of honest sweat and motor oil. The screen door banged behind him like a starter pistol. Sarah and Jacob came over that night. I laid it all out: will, trust, co-op, numbers. Jacob whistled low. Sarah's eyes filled, but she was smiling. "Mom," she said. "You've been running that place since Grandpa Walter needed a walker. It's been yours longer than it was ever Darren's." Jacob added, "I've got leave coming. I can help with the books till you're steady. Marisol says the hospital's credit union does small business loans." We talked until the wee hours. Spreadsheets on the coffee table. Emma asleep on the couch, with marker on her cheek from drawing Grandma's garage in purple crayon. By dawn, we had a plan, rough, but ours. Monday, I called the lawyer, confirmed every detail. Walter had thought of everything. Non-compete clauses, equipment liens, even a line item for cinnamon rolls on Fridays. Tuesday, I walked into the bank, same teller who'd cashed my first Thompson paycheck in 2011. She took one look at the trust documents and called the manager. By Friday, we had loan approval contingent on the buyout. Darren got wind of it Thursday, stormed into the shop at noon, tied askew, shouting about lawsuits and breach of contract. The guys, bless them, formed a wall. Miguel held up his phone recording. Rusty just said, "Calm as you please. Clock's ticking. Darren, 30 days. Darren's face went purple. He pointed at me. I was there picking up my final check. "You think you can steal my business?" I met his eyes. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm buying what was promised to the people who kept it alive while you were sipping my ties in California." He blustered, threatened, and was finally left in a cloud of burnt rubber. The guys cheered like we'd won the Super Bowl. That night we held the first official cop meeting in the break room, folding chairs in a circle, pizza boxes for a table. 11 of us now. Some had trickled back when they heard. I stood where Walter used to give safety talks. "First order of business," I said, "we change the locks tomorrow. Second, we bring back Christmas hams." Laughter rippled, warm, real. We voted on everything: profit sharing, health plan, vacation policy. I insisted on a clause: if any partner wants out, the coop buys them at fair market. No golden parachutes. Tyler suggested a scholarship for kids of employees named after Walter. Passed unanimous. By 10 we had bylaws rough drafted on napkins. I tucked them in my purse next to the socket wrench. The buyout closed on a Wednesday in April, sun shining like it approved. We signed in the same conference room where Darren had offered me the cut. The lawyer knew respect in his eyes, slid the keys across the table. Not to me, to all of us. I took one, passed the ring around. 11 keys, 11 futures. Darren didn't show. Sent a proxy who looked embarrassed to be there. We changed the sign that afternoon. Thompson Sons Automotive. Employee. Owned since 2025. The painter added a tiny cinnamon roll in the corner. Lisa's idea. The first morning the sign read, "Employee owned." I opened at 6:30 sharp. Same as always. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Rusty had already brewed coffee in the old percolator we dug out of storage. The pod machine sat in the dumpster like yesterday's bad idea. Miguel flipped the open sign while Tyler strung a banner across the bays. Under new, old management. Customers honked as they drove past. Mrs. Larson brought lemon bars before 8. We ran lean those first weeks. No fancy software upgrades. No corporate consultants. Just us, the lifts, and a whiteboard where we tracked every dime. I took the smallest office. Walter's old one felt too big without him. Set up a card table, and kept the regulator clock ticking on the wall. The trust money bought us breathing room, but we still watched pennies. Parts orders went through Lisa again. She negotiated like a shark with a smile. Rusty handled scheduling. Miguel trained the apprentices. Tyler became our unofficial PR guy, posting before and after photos on the shop's dusty Instagram. Followers tripled in a month. Darren didn't vanish quietly. He filed a motion to contest the will, claiming undue influence. The lawyer, our lawyer now, paid from cop dues, laughed so hard he snorted coffee. Walter's codicil was ironclad, dated, witnessed by his doctor and the church secretary. Video statement recorded on his phone the week his arthritis flared so bad he couldn't hold a pen. The judge dismissed the motion in 12 minutes. Darren's appeal died in paperwork, but the real consequence wasn't legal, it was social. Word travels fast in a town where everybody's cousin knows your mechanic. Darren tried to open a competing shop to counties over big glass windows, neon signs. Darren's Auto Elite. The grand opening was a Tuesday. 3 customers showed up. One was his realtor. By Friday he'd laid off half the staff he'd poached from chain garages. Rumor was he'd sunk his inheritance into the lease. The bank started calling. Meanwhile, our waiting room filled. Old customers came back. New ones followed the reviews. Honest, they wrote. Fair prices. They treat you like family. We brought back the Friday cinnamon rolls, my grandma's recipe, doubled because Tyler's wife craved them pregnant. We closed at noon the day Emma performed in her kindergarten play so Sarah and I could cheer from the front row. When Miguel's daughter needed braces, the cop voted to cover the deductible. When Rusty's truck threw a rod, we rebuilt it after hours, no labor charge. Money was tight, but it was ours. Profit split 11 ways after expenses. My first check was smaller than Darren's old salary, but it came with something priceless. Every morning I walked in knowing the place wouldn't close because some suit in California needed a yacht payment. The community noticed. The local paper ran a feature, how a 62-year-old widow and her mechanics took back their shop. They used a photo of me in my navy dress. Arms around Rusty and Miguel. The new sign gleaming behind us. Sarah framed it for the break room. Underneath she wrote, in Sharpie, for Walter. Darren's final humiliation came in June. His shop shuttered. The bank auctioned the lifts. He listed his father's house, the one Walter had left him, at a loss. Showed up at our door, one humid afternoon, tie gone, shirt damp at the armpits, asked to speak to me privately. I met him in the parking lot. No need to give him the dignity of Walter's office. Evelyn, he started, voice cracking like thin ice. I miscalculated the market. You miscalculated people. I said, not unkind, just true. You thought loyalty was a line item. It's the whole balance sheet. He looked at the ground. Any chance you'd hire me? Parts runner, anything. I studied him, really looked. The boy who used to visit his daddy in summer, grease on his knees, eyes wide at the roar of engines. Somewhere that boy had traded wonder for spreadsheets. No, Darren, I said gently, but there's a trade school in Columbus. They're always looking for instructors who know numbers. Start there. Learn what your father tried to teach you. He nodded, got in his leased BMW, and drove away. I never saw him again. That night we had a co-op barbecue in the back lot. Folding tables, string lights, kids running between the lifts with sparklers. Jacob grilled steaks. Marisol brought flan that melted on your tongue. Someone hooked a speaker to Tyler's phone. Old Motown filled the air. I danced with Emma, her tiara crooked, my orthopedic shoes tapping asphalt. Rusty slow danced with his new girlfriend, a widow from church who laughed at his jokes. Miguel's wife filmed it all on her phone, tears shining. Later, when the stars came out and the kids were asleep on blankets, I slipped away to the office, sat in the dark with just the glow of the regulator. The tick was steady, comforting. I whispered to the empty room, we did it, Walter, we kept her running. Outside, someone started singing Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Off-key, loud, perfect. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. The summer rolled on like a slow, sweet song. July brought heat that shimmered off the asphalt and made the bay doors stick when you tried to close them at night. We installed 2 big floor fans from the hardware store, nothing fancy, but they moved the air enough to keep tempers cool. August meant back-to-school oil changes. Parents lined up with minivans full of dorm supplies and nervous freshmen. We gave every high school senior a free safety check tires, brakes, lights, and a coupon for their first tune-up when they came home for Thanksgiving. Word spreads faster than could. By Labor Day we had a waiting list. My 60th third birthday fell on a Friday. I'd planned to work through it quietly, the way I'd done since Harold passed, but the co-op had other ideas. They closed the shop at noon, sign on the door. Gone, celebrating the boss lady. Rusty's truck led a convoy to the lake coolers in the back. Kids piled in like puppies. We grilled hot dogs on a rusty hibachi, swam until our fingers pruned, and sat around a fire as the sun bled orange across the water. Tyler's wife went into labor that night, right there on a picnic blanket. We drove her to the hospital in Miguel's freshly washed Suburban, hazard lights flashing like a parade. Little Walter James was born at 2:17 a.m. 8 pounds even, with his daddy's calic and his mama's lungs. We passed out cigars in the waiting room, the cheap kind, because that's what mechanics can afford, and took turns holding him through the glass. Fall painted the maples along the highway gold and crimson. We hit our 6-month numbers in September, revenue up 28%, expenses down 11%. The trust was paid back early. We voted to roll the surplus into a rainy day fund and a college account for baby Walter. I finally cashed my first full profit share check, enough to paint the house the soft blue Harold always wanted, and still tuck a little away. Sarah and Mark paid off their van. Jacob surprised Marisol with a weekend in Nashville, first trip without kids since the honeymoon. The shop itself changed in small, living ways. Lisa hung fairy lights over the parts counter, said it made the place feel less like a dungeon. Miguel built a wooden bench from scrap pallet wood for the waiting room. Customers carved their initials in it the way kids do yearbooks. Rusty started a tradition. Every Friday at closing, whoever fixed the toughest job got to pick the music for the drive home. Tyler chose Springsteen. Miguel, Bad Bunny. Lisa, old school Whitney. I stuck with Motown, couldn't help it. We weren't perfect. There were arguments. Rusty and Miguel butted heads over inventory software. Tyler forgot to order spark plugs, and we lost a fleet account for a week. Money got tight when the compressor died in October. Quote came in at 12 grand. We passed the hat, literally, Rusty's beat-up Reds cap, and covered it in 3 days. No one missed a paycheck. The town embraced us like a prodigal. The Rotary Club asked me to speak at their luncheon, nervous as a cat in a room full of rockers. But I told our story plainly. The high school shop teacher brought his class every Thursday. Our apprentices taught them how to read a torque wrench. When the food pantry ran low before Thanksgiving, we parked a trailer out front and filled it with canned goods and frozen turkeys. Mrs. Larson knitted scarves for every co-op kid, mismatched colors, but warm. Darren's name stopped coming up except in passing, like a scar you forget hurts until the weather changes. Someone said he'd taken that teaching job in Columbus, moved into a 1-bedroom near campus. I sent him a Christmas card, no note, just the shop's new logo and season's greetings from the Thompson Sons family. It felt like the right kind of mercy. Winter crept in with the smell of wood smoke and the crunch of salt under tires. We decorated early lights on the lifts. A tree in the lobby made of old mufflers sprayed silver. The co-op voted to match every employee donation to the Children's Hospital dollar for dollar, up to $5,000. We hit it by December 20th. Christmas Eve, I closed at 2. The guys had families waiting. I had mine. Sarah hosted table extended with plywood and a tablecloth. Every leaf and Jacob carved the turkey. Marisol's flan had 3 layers this year. Emma, now 6 going on 16, insisted on reading the Nativity from her children's Bible, stumbling over frankincense until Henry supplied Frankie's scents. We laughed until our sides hurt. Later, when the kids were asleep under a pile of new blankets, the adults sat by the fire with cocoa laced with a whisper of bourbon. Jacob raised his mug to Mom, who taught us that walking away isn't quitting if you're walking toward something better. I teared up, couldn't help it. Sarah squeezed my hand. And to Walter, for trusting us with his legacy. We clinked mugs, the fire crackling soft agreements. On New Year's Eve, we worked half a day, folks, needing to get home safe for parties. At 4 we locked up, gathered in the break room with sparkling cider and the last of the lemon bars. Rusty turned off the lights. Tyler hit play on his phone. Auld Lang Syne filled the space, not the fancy version, just the one everybody knows. We linked arms, 11 of us, in a crooked circle, and sang off-key, voices echoing off toolboxes and dreams. Outside, snow started to fall fat. lazy flakes that stuck to the new sign. I stepped onto the apron to watch it settle. The shop looked small from the street, just a low brick building with glowing windows. But it held everything I loved. Rusty joined me, hands in his coat pockets. Think Walters, smiling. I looked up past the snow, past the dark, to whatever came next. He's probably telling St. Peter the coffee's weak, and the angels need torque specs. Rusty chuckled, breath fogging. We did good, Evie. We did better than good, I said. We did the right. Spring came early that year. Daffodils poked through before the snow melted. We broke ground on a small addition, a real waiting room with windows and a coffee station that didn't require an engineering degree. The Cope voted to name it the Harold Harper Lounge. Sarah cried when we told her. Jacob came home on leave to pour the slab. Emma painted her handprint in the wet concrete. One April morning, I opened the mail to find a letter, no return address. Columbus postmark. Inside was a single photograph. Darren standing beside a chalkboard covered in budget equations. A dozen teenagers leaning in. On the back, in careful block letters, you were right. Numbers only work when people do. Thank you, D. I tucked it in the frame with Walter's photo on my desk. Some circles closed quietly by our 1-year anniversary. We'd paid off the bank loan, doubled the rainy day fund, and started a second scholarship, this one for girls in STEM. Named after Lisa's daughter, who wants to be an astronaut. The sign out front got a fresh coat of paint. The cinnamon roll in the corner now had sprinkles, Emma's touch. I still get up at 5. Still make coffee strong enough to float a piston. But now, when I walk through the door, the regulator clock greets me like an old friend, and 11 voices call out morning, Miss Evie, in a chorus that sounds like home. I'm 63 closer to 64, and some mornings my knees complain when I climb the steps to the office. But my heart, Lord, my heart is lighter than it's been since Harold was alive. I have a family that chose me, a legacy I helped save, and a future I never dared imagine at 48, when I walked into Walter's office with nothing but a resume and a prayer.